Everybody seems to want a utopia, a life without suffering. Everything is in abundance and free. You don't have to work or suffer. But is that the right way to live? We're going to look into Calhoun's experiment and find out.
Put some respect on my name. You understand me? When y'all saying my name, put some respect on it.
All right, so the Utopia. So for those not familiar, I did post a link to like 3 videos explaining Calhoun's experiment and exactly what happened. Specifically, they go over Universe 25, but apparently it was repeated numerous times, and they pretty much came to the same conclusion whenever it was made into a utopia, meaning they gave them the mice and rats everything they needed to survive, and it inevitably led to their extinction, unfortunately. So people talk about a life without suffering. Of course, the last episode, last broadcast, I talk about uh, Jordan Peterson's quote, uh, "Life, life is suffering." Sorry, let's start radio. Life is suffering, and I was talking about how true that quote was, and how when he was talking about that I was also referring to how, okay, is there something about suffering that applies to like how we develop bonds and how we do things in society? And in addition to that, is there also something about suffering and just life in general? Because with Calhoun's experiment, what happened was with that utopia, it led to extinction. The mice had everything they needed: food, water, space to shelter. And there were some things that I found interesting during that experiment. Some key things happened. For one, uh, there were natural hierarchies that were made. The more dominant male alpha rats, and then they're the ones they chose to mate with. They protected their part of the place. The and then the others, pretty much all the others, like the other male and female rats that weren't the alphas. So they developed a natural hierarchy. And then in addition to that, the ones on the bottom, they suffered the most. And that, when I say suffer, I don't mean like suffer as in like they suffering through life. No, it's just like they were fighting amongst each other. It was one big old orgy. Everything and everybody was having sex with everything and everybody else. If that doesn't sound familiar, the guys were having sex with other guys. The girls were having sex with all of them. The girls also became fairly aggressive as well. There were some changes in the behaviors of both the male and females in that regard, which I just kind of explained that. And then, of course, the alphas, they were referred to as the perfect ones. Like everybody else, kind of like it was like they were untouchable. Like everybody else knew not to mess with the alphas. Like they kept themselves well groomed and whatever, and everybody stayed away from them. They didn't mess with them. They were the perfect ones. Let me know if that. Let me know if that sounds familiar. But that it wasn't enforced or anything. It's just they just instinctually did that. Like they already had developed the hierarchies. The alphas had established themselves. They went through a few generations, of course, and yeah, it was what it was. And then nobody messed with the alpha, the perfect ones, quote unquote. And then in addition to that, the females that were giving birth, which were the perfect ones and whatnot, they were extremely vain. They only cared about themselves. Extremely selfish. They abandoned the children. Now that one, I found that interesting as well. So you had rampant sex with everything and everybody, like a big old orgy. Doesn't even matter the sex. Aggressive females, odd behavior in both the males and females in general. The perfect ones, the development of hierarchies and the treatment of the perfect ones, and then the abandonment and neglect of the children. And eventually that led to their extinction. So I was thinking, in addition to just the bonding, is suffering in general critical for survival of a species? Because you think about it, if they were out in the wilderness, there's Darwinism, there's natural selection. So instead of all the rats and mice just naturally surviving and thriving, they would have each been picked off by predators, by the elements. So a lot of them would have actually naturally died off because of that. And the fittest would have survived only. So everybody wouldn't have survived. Only the fittest would have survived, and they would have had to work through all the turmoil of life. Had to run from. So they would actually became even more fit because they would have had to run from predators and scavenge for food and become more efficient at the things they do. And in a way, they had a purpose. However, in that utopia, there was no predators. The food was plentiful. They had space. They didn't have to struggle. There was no struggle whatsoever. And in addition to that, the weak ones, the ones that would have been seen as weak, they weren't sorted out. So if I were to compare that to our society, it would be like if we were in nature, the first to go, of course, would be the weak. Those born with defects, those unable to work with others, because we naturally evolved to because rats are actually have a similar social structure as humans. They're very social creatures, mice and rats. I actually used to have a pet fancy rat. You could train him like a dog. And I kid you not, he actually got along with the dogs. So rats are actually they're actually one of the fancy rat is one of this. I think it was the most intelligent rodent. So they're very social. They need to socialize. And if they don't, it's hold on. It's like putting an inmate in solitary confinement, and then apparently a lot of people they can't handle that and they go crazy. So they do need to socialize amongst one another. However, I do believe for when that utopia is created for whatever reason or purpose, it negates Darwinism. So now it's no longer survival of the fittest. It's get in where you fit in. Because the weak aren't being picked off. They aren't being sorted out. Or at least they're not being picked off or sorted out as quick as they would have in the wilderness. So that might be a part of it, because now you might have defective mice and rats that are in the bunch mating when naturally they wouldn't be because they would have been picked off in the wilderness. So that's a possibility. Additionally, when it comes to like the neglect of the children and things like that, maybe you have because mind you, this happened after a couple of generations. The population like doubled, like I think it was like 2 or 3 times. I forgot how many times it doubled, but the population did double a few times. So maybe also when there's food and stuff, they didn't have to learn how to forage for food. They didn't have to learn how to watch out for predators. So maybe when the rats were given birth and stuff, they were like, I mean, get your food. So that maybe that's why they neglected and forgot about the children. That's possible as well. And in today's society, which is actually, we actually are currently in a phase of Calhoun's experiment, unfortunately. That's why earlier when I was naming out some of the things, if that sounded familiar. But if you think about it, a lot of the struggles and stuff we go through, to be honest, most of it is self-inflicted. There's not too many wars going on now. We've kind of, we fight differently now today. Yes, there's conflict here and there, and certain, and usually it's overseas, but there's not like a world war going on. It's not that bad. We don't have any predators other than ourselves. Food is plentiful. Actually, it's too plentiful. That's why we're actually so obese over here in America. Like I said, we're literally killing ourselves. And of course, we all those what is it? Those parabens, those forever particles that have been put out here, potentially giving us all cancer and stuff like that. Like we're literally killing ourselves. Like screw the environment, screw suffering through the environment. We're killing ourselves as we speak. But I do believe suffering and struggle. Like struggle is, of course, you're resisting you're fighting against it. You're giving some sort of resistance because anybody can suffer. You can suffer doing nothing and then you perish. But you have to be able to struggle, and it makes us better. And a good example of that is the human body itself. Now, outside of muscular dystrophy, which is actually a disease where the muscle breaks down and doesn't function properly, there is muscle hypertrophy and atrophy. Which hypertrophy is when you train your muscle and build up muscle, and the muscle gets bigger. And atrophy is when it gets smaller. And it gets smaller when you don't use it. So that concept of use it or lose it, very true. If you don't use your muscles, they will get smaller, and you will lose mobility because you lose muscle mass. Now this is the exercise science part of me talking. Now, Jesus, it's ridiculous. Now, I'm not sure if you guys know this or not, but actually, when you're weightlifting or training, that burning sensation you get when you're lifting those weights, outside of doing cardio, where it's usually lactic acid buildup, and that depends upon your blood's ability to efficiently remove the lactic acid using mitochondria in your blood. You're actually tearing muscle cells. So when you're lifting weights, you're tearing your muscle tissue. You're creating trauma in your body. That's why you need recovery, which is the period where your body takes that time to repair the trauma you put upon it. And it doesn't only repair it, but it improves it. That's why outside of use it or lose it is for atrophy. For hypertrophy, it is what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Because you can overdo it and eventually you go down the wrong path. Your body actually starts to break down if you do too much. But if you do it properly, you'll start to build on muscle and get stronger. That's what weight training does. And you have to keep it consistent. Now you have to increase the weight to continue to build and get better. Now in life, it's also true for your brain. Everything in the body, it's use it or lose it. And what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So the more you think, the more you read, the more you do all this stuff, It's been they've done studies on this, especially like when it comes to Alzheimer's. My grandfather had Alzheimer's. Some of us are we have a higher likelihood of cancer and Alzheimer's. But when it's done, you know, you can actually decrease your chance of Alzheimer's by using your brain, doing brain puzzles, reading, doing stuff that makes your brain activate. You can decrease or slow down. You can decrease the likelihood or slow down the development of Alzheimer's because you're using your brain cells. They're not being wasted. And actually, a lot of people don't know this, but sometime in your life, your brain actually becomes less, how can I say it, trainable. It becomes harder for you to learn stuff. I think it's like later. I think it's like 25 or 30. Your brain actually it becomes a little harder for you to actually learn stuff because when you're young, you're a sponge. Your brain is if you want to learn new languages, you want to learn, how to properly do like if the best time to learn is a child actually. Children learn exceptionally well. That's why a lot of Hispanic kids they speak. It's easy for them to speak multiple languages because they're a child and they learn it, growing up, and of course through practice. They talk English when they are out in the world, and they talk Spanish with their parents and stuff, and they learn it very quickly because their brain is a sponge that soaks it all up, and then it's actually very interesting a child's brain how quickly they're able to learn stuff. But the older you get, the harder it does become to learn. Now, it's not necessarily you can't teach your old dog new tricks. It's just a little harder, and sometimes people are set in their ways. That's really what it is. So, really, the saying should be: it's hard to teach an old dog new trick. But think about that. The suffering. There's something about that. It seems to always be you got to work to get to where you need to be. Successful people usually have to work. They're not given anything. They actually have to struggle to get to where they are. If you think about lottery winners, you give them a bunch of money. What do? They blow it. Look at the entertainers and athletes. They're pretty much given money to play it. They don't have to get out here in the real world and earn it like other people. They actually have to learn. They actually have to learn viable real world and demand skills, not just skills to play a game for entertainment, and get paid an exceptional, oh my god, an extravagant amount of money. Yes, they compete against other athletes, but they didn't have to work as hard to earn that money like other people, which is why I think it's like 60% of them go broke or something after because they don't know how to manage the money. They didn't have to go through the struggle to earn it like the people that did become millionaires through business and other means. Same with the lottery people. Most of them go broke too because they come from the broke. They come from being poor and broke. They come from a sometimes defeated mindset, or they just don't. They're not fit. There's a reason why they weren't able to earn the money the right way because they're just not fit in society. And then when they get the money, what happens? They blow it. They blow right through it. It's like a financial Calhoun experiment. They just blow right through it, right to extinction. But I'm going to keep bringing this subject up because, like I said, there's a reason why that quote "life is suffering" is so true, and it's not bad because I believe we are meant to suffer. We're meant to go through things. We're meant to resist to thrive. And that's how Darwinism was meant to be, to get the fittest, to get the best thrive, where the best thrive naturally. So no, so till let me do a little 30-second break. Oh, it is loud as hell. I hope y'all can hear me because it is loud as hell in this truck. I ain't gonna lie. If this microphone cuts out all this background noise, I mean, shoot, good to it. But this week, Christmas. Happy holidays. I'm not too big on holidays, but I know some of y'all might be. In addition to this, I'm going to relate this subject to everything. Everything. Everything I do is tied together. You know, all there's like an equation of life, and it's all tied together. So suffering, trials, and tribulations is definitely part of it, of life. It's a necessary component, it seems. And it seemed, and when you find a truth, it seems to be true more times than not. Like I named all these things where it requires some type of effort to overcome stuff, to struggle, suffering, and it leads to improvement. You know, when it comes to the lottery winners, muscle training, the Calhoun's experiment in general, society in general, Darwinism and nature, it all requires struggle. So the fittest survive. So suffering is definitely part of life. That part of the equation so far is very true. All right, let me not take up too much time. Till next time.
お前はもう